Talk Radio.
Hey folks, welcome to Book Chatter. I am your host, Stacy Cochran, and we have an outstanding panel of authors with us on the line tonight. We've got a lot of ground to cover, but the first thing that I want to do is just have everybody kind of introduce themselves, talk a little bit about your books, your writing, a little bit of your background and experience. Chris, since you've been on the show before, why don't you get us started? Tell us a little bit about your writing and the books that you have available.
Well, thank you for having me on. I have two collections of short fiction out. One is The Middle-Aged Man in the Sea, and the other is Months and Seasons. And my first novel came out earlier this year, and it's called The Brightest Moon of the Century. They are literary books, but this very weekend I finished a draft of my first mystery novel. So that's coming up, I don't know, probably 2 years down the line.
So you just completed the first draft of that. Do you have a title for the new mystery novel?
10 Days to a Bad Habit.
I like it. It sounds great.
Thanks.
Looks like we have somebody else joining us on the line here. Who is this that I just picked up?
Hey, it's RJ.
Hey, RJ. How are you doing tonight?
Okay, just a little tired.
Well, thanks for joining us. I know you've had a lot going on, so thanks for tuning in. So we're going around the table here, just letting everybody kind of introduce themselves and their books, their background and experience. We've had Chris Meeks speak so far. I want to remind folks who are watching, if you don't mind, please head over to Twitter, tweet that you are watching us live on Book Chatter. You can post the URL and hopefully get a good audience in here for these awesome authors that we have on the line. Also, you can join in the instant message chat. You'll see an icon on your screen that says join in a chat or instant message chat. Feel free to click on that, and then you can join in and ask questions and interact with our authors online tonight. I'm your host, Stacy Cochran. Our next author up that we have here with us tonight is Kathy Abel, or Kelly Abel. Sorry about that, Kelly. Tell us a little bit about your books and your background and experience.
Okay, thanks for having me, Stacy. I really appreciate it. I have been writing novels since about 2000. I had my first book published in May of this year, which is called Sealed in Lies, and it's a romantic thriller full of suspense and sinister characters about a plot to assassinate the President of the United States and a SEAL team gone bad. And it does have a romantic twist to it with an unlikely love between two people who find themselves in some very extraordinary circumstances. Then in August, I published the second book, which is a young adult paranormal called Haunted Destiny. And it's a story of a girl who becomes an orphan as a teenager and has to go live with her estranged grandmother. And she discovers that she has a gift of seeing and talking to spirits. And she has to use that gift to help one of her arch rivals get rid of some unwanted, nasty ghosts that come with some furniture that the girl ends up getting in her house. So it's it's kind of a chilling, thrilling experience there. And then my newest book that just came out is called Online Angel, and it's a romance about two people who dated in college, separated, and reconnected using a social network or social networking site. I couldn't use Facebook, but it's very, very similar to that, and some of the tragedy that they went through before they could reconnect with each other. So those are the three books. I am published by Hearts on Fire Books. That's my publisher, and that's a little bit about me.
Very cool. Can you talk just briefly, Kelly, about some of the choices that you make when you're writing for a young adult audience in contrast to writing for adults?
It was really funny. I wanted to try writing in the young adult genre. A lot of people ask me, why do you do different genres, or do you feel comfortable doing that with the same name and not using a different pen name? And I do. I think it broadens the audience. So when I started to think about young adult fiction, what got me started on Haunted Destiny was my daughter is not much of a reader, and she's 17 years old, and I said, what would you read if I wrote you something? and she really likes the Click series by Lisa Harrison. And so she said, I want a Click ghost story. And the Click series by Lisa Harrison is a lot of young teenage drama about a group of girls in L.A. And, so that really kind of started the whole thing with young adults. So I think you look at your audience differently. Of course, it doesn't have the the steamier love scenes that the other book that I wrote has, and I mean it does have romance in it, but it it only goes just a little smooch or two. So you think about that, and then I think about what they'd be interested in, and I had to think about the teen language. How did I get that accurate when I was having the dialogue and writing the dialogue? So those were some of the things that I thought about as I was starting to put the book together. And fortunately, it's been pretty well received. It's gotten some really good reviews, and I recently went to the Great American Teach-In and talked to some 8th grade language arts classes, and a couple of the kids had read the book, and they spoke highly of it, so I felt really good about that.
That's very cool. It's always great to get some good feedback from your readers. Our next
Absolutely.
Our next author that we have on the line with us tonight is Sierra Rose. Tell us a little bit about your background, your books, Sierra Rose.
Well, I started writing in high school, and don't really have as much writing background as some of the other authors. But my first published book came out early this year, actually. Celtic Evil. It's a 5-part paranormal romantic suspense series, and I'm still working on the sequel to it. And I also have a poetry book out with poems based on my events during my sister's battle with breast cancer. And I just completed a action novel that should be out mid-December called Flames of Betrayal. It's part of a Seal Team Omega series that I'm just started. And that's basically about me.
Very cool. Can you tell us a little bit, Sierra, similar to the question I asked Kelly? Those are, very different kinds of genres. What kinds of choices do you make? How's your writing process similar or different when you're writing, suspense, thriller fiction, or poetry, or in contrast to this action novel, Flames of the Trail?
With the poetry, everything's different. I have to feel the emotion to be able to write poetry, it seems. So I don't really write it as much. For writing the others, they're different genres, so they require different mindsets, it seems. Like when I'm writing the action novel, I can't write on the Celtic Evil because I get my scenes confused, and I might accidentally shoot a character that may require magic.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, you've got to keep everything straight, I think, and that's no small feat, no doubt about it. Well, I want to remind folks who are watching you or watching Book Chatter, we have an awesome panel of authors with us tonight on the line. So far, we have Sierra Rose, who is the author of Celtic Evil, as well as Flames of the Trail, Kelly Abel, who is the author of Online Angel, and Chris Meeks, who is the author of The Middle-Aged Man and the Sea. I'm also joined by my regular co-host RJ Keller, who is the author of Waiting for Spring. If you want to tweet that you're watching the show on Twitter, that would be very helpful. That way we can let some folks know to tune in here live. Also, we do have an instant message chat. If you're interested in asking a question of any of the authors on our panel tonight, you can join in the instant message chat. So RJ, to recap last week's show, it has been an active week, has it not?
Very. Sorry, just got my headphones. Yes, it was very interesting last week. I'll be honest, I was so busy manning the chat board that I didn't really hear most of the actual show, but the chat board was very filled with sort of anti-self-publishing, anti-indie author types, and it was a little bit frustrating, to say the least. So that's, I think, what sort of started the week's events. is that.
For folks who are...
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, RJ.
Oh, I was going to say, one of the authors who had joined us, not for as a guest, but who had just joined us in the chat room, had, well, it was a little condescending in general. It was very much a mood of they were there to teach us about the, evils of vanity publishing and, to school us in how we ought to self-publish, and apparently not getting the idea that we had indeed already published our own books and we were very well educated, thank you, in how to get it done. So I think that just sort of fed a lot of not good stuff, just sort of the general attitude.
Yeah, for folks who were unable to watch last week's show, it was we had on 4 traditionally published authors and 3 self-published, independently published authors. And at the heart of the conversation was really this recent venture that Harlequin Enterprises has started, and that is basically a self-publishing vanity press. And so, as you can imagine, having 4 traditionally published authors on with their fans and readers, and a few independently published authors, it really got to be an interesting discussion. What was most interesting to me, I think, was the fallout afterwards. I kind of, the reason why I did the show was I wanted to listen to everybody's thoughts and perspectives on it, and then, come to my own conclusion about it. And whenever I wrote up my blog on Sunday about the show that we had on Friday evening, it hit the roof. I've never seen anything like it. In one day, I had over 500 hits on a blog that had been getting 10 or 15 hits up until that point per day, max. So it's been a very lively week, and I think that we have an awesome panel of authors on with us tonight to discuss the merit and the reasons why you would consider self-publishing in contrast to finding a traditional publisher. So Chris, you've got a lot of credibility and background and experience. So what was it about self-publishing or independently publishing that appealed to you as a writer?
Well, listen, first of all, I started in the publishing business. I was a senior editor at a publishing house. I was at the other end receiving people's bad manuscripts, and some good ones. But I saw from the inside how books are published. When I came together with a manuscript of my short fiction, which had already been published in literary magazines, I went to an agent who knew me, who admired my work, and he said, write a novel. He didn't want anything to do with short story manuscript because there's no money in it. And I said, it's done, just send it out, then I'll write a novel. Long story short, I started writing a novel, but what do I do with this manuscript? And a friend of mine said, you've been in publishing, you know what's required. And he told me about this new print-on-demand technology, which sounded very interesting. So I went into this both naively, not understanding what it meant, and also with a lot of knowledge, knowing how to turn a manuscript into a published book. And I did what I did at the publishing house. I hired graphic designer for the cover and the inside of the book. I hired editors to go over the inside of the book, even though these stories had been published in literary journals and had been edited. I still wanted it perfect, and I had to choose the order they went in. I went to a publicist. I did everything that I knew, and I sent my book out in advance, 3 months before a publication date. My main goal was to make the book look like it was from a big publisher, including having the copyright page look right, having even Library of Congress information, a cataloging information there. Nothing about my book said this was, self-published. And I sent it first out to reviewers and did my best to promote it. And my very first review was in the LA Times, and it really sent it off. And 8 months later, it was mentioned in Entertainment Weekly as a great print-on-demand book. And in between, I had reviewers, big and small, look at it. So I suppose it was beginner's luck to have this kind of thing. The next book had more reviewers, but not as no big newspapers. I'm fascinated by this subject, by the way, because the traditional ways to get in are more and more difficult, and especially if you're doing literary work, as RJ and I are doing. I don't know the other authors yet, but I have an agent, and the agent also did not want to get involved. I have a new agent, I should say. The second agent didn't want to get involved in short fiction either. So the two books were done that way, and there's no point in arguing with traditionally published authors on this issue. Poetry and short fiction are not mainstream kind of writing. Now that I've gotten into it with my first novel, because I like the power of having the book come out the way I wanted. I had this novel I wanted out now, not in 2 years. And so The Brightest Moon of the Century came out earlier this year. I will say I like and love traditional publishers, and I hope this new mystery novel I finished will be done by a traditional publisher, because they have something I will never have, which is a large marketing budget. Getting into bookstores is a huge challenge for self-publishers, which I've been able to break down the barriers with The Brightest Moon of the Century. I worked with Barnes & Noble's small press department, and my book did make it into a number of Barnes & Nobles, as well as bookstores around LA. But it's not a book that most people find in most bookstores. So I'm also interested in this subject because come April, I'm a moderator leading a panel at the AWP convention in Denver on this very subject. Self-publishing has been sort of not spoken about a lot at the AWP convention, which is the Associated Writers group. And so if I'm going to have some of the controversy that you did last week, I better get myself inoculated, I think.
Well, hopefully it'll be a little bit more civil than that. I think that there is the only way that I can really come to any sense of understanding about what led to the kind of controversy that we had is that there had to have been a lot of insecurity among at least one or two of the panelists that we had on about, and I'm thinking specifically of the traditionally published authors that we had on, because they sort of led the fight online, and I don't know. I think one of the authors really did kind of overreact. I think that's the best word to characterize
I totally
it.
agree.
Well, I don't know if you saw this on Kindle boards also, but I don't know. There's probably 500 posts with a few traditionally published authors really upset. I feel like they feel the system is perhaps being clogged up, or but more overtly, they just think because they're traditionally published, they're better than others.
that was definitely the attitude that was coming across last week. Like I said, when I talk about the attitude, I'm not speaking of the authors who were actually featured, because that's where the confusion came in during the week. I'm speaking of, specifically in the chat box, because, as I said, I honestly didn't hear most of the show because I was monitoring the chat board. But in addition to being condescending, it was just very, I think the comment that sort of got me on my own rant on my own blog was the comment that because my book, which, of course the author had not read or even heard of, was not available in bookstores, that made it not real. And that I had to step away from the keyboard because, of course, I was insulted, I'll be honest, and I didn't want to overreact. And because of my position as the co-host, I thought it was completely inappropriate for me to do too much more other than, say, my readers feel that it's real, and that was pretty much all I was going to say. But because I had so many of my own readers who, watch and listen to Book Chatter, they were kind of disappointed in me that I hadn't, said anything more to her. Because, of course, they do like my book. A lot of people really have been moved by it and touched by it, and they were insulted by the comments because, they've paid money for my book, and they've, recommended it to friends. And so for this author to say that it wasn't real was kind of a slap in their face as well as in mine, which is what made me take to my blog to sort of, stick up for myself and for my readers as well. And the comments on my blog were misinterpreted as being aimed at the authors who were guests, which of course they weren't. And I think that's kind of where that part of the controversy started. And they took my comments personally, which, again, even if they had been directed at the authors who are guests, I still don't see what, unless, like you said, Stacey, there is that either insecurity or, as you said, Chris, just that general feeling of being superior and, how dare I, step up and say something. I didn't understand the overreaction on their camp. But it's just, I'm not one for this us against them mentality. I don't think of it as that. I think of it as two different roads to the same basic goal, getting our books and our words out there. We just take two different paths.
Yeah.
I don't look at myself as better or worse or lesser or, greater. It's just different, ways of getting them out there. And I think that that's why I try to avoid that type of controversy. But it seems like it gets stirred up all over the place, and I honestly don't understand it.
Well, it's
go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, I can, at least from the Kindle boards, some of the feelings I got from traditionally published authors where they studied the craft long and hard. They took their bruises along the way, and they earned their way up, and they think perhaps someone self-publishing and getting noticed is somehow cheating. The fact is, there are so many self-published books coming out, and so many of them are not very good, as it's likely to be when you just upload your Microsoft Word document unedited. But I don't worry about it or even feel threatened because the marketplace will take care of that.
Absolutely.
If they sell more than 50, more power to them. But, also last year at USC, I attended a panel with publishers on the panel, and like McSweeney's was there, the publisher of McSweeney's. If they said a successful novel for them, 2,000 copies. Well, that's in reach of people who make their own little publishing company, as I've done.
Right.
And McSweeney's is a great little publishing house because they do spend a lot of time on the look and feel of their books, and they hire some cutting-edge designers. And if people starting their own little companies put in the same effort, they may get noticed. But the same effort required by some, well-deserved traditional authors, we're paying the same dues, RJ and I and others, and we've spent years learning the craft. I've happened to also spend years in publishing, so I don't feel I'm doing this casually by any means. And I also teach writing, and I see, my students frustrated and wanting to write well and making, a name for themselves. And it's like getting teeth straightened. It doesn't happen in a week. It takes years. So at least that's what it was with my teeth.
Well, you are watching Book Chatter. I am your host, Stacy Cochran. We have on the line with us Chris Meeks, who has just been speaking about some of the credibility behind independently published authors, and some of the hard work it took to get to the point where he was ready to self-publish his books, one of which is The Middle-Aged Man and the Sea, which has been doing quite well on Amazon Kindle. We also have on the line Kelly Abel. She is the author of Online Angel. And we have Sierra Rose, who is the author of Celtic Evil. So Sierra, how do you, as an author, when you're thinking about, okay, I know I'm self-publishing my book, how do you process and handle the credibility issue, or is it something that even comes up to you?
It doesn't really come up to me. When I was younger and I first started writing, I tried the traditional route, and all the submissions to agents and publishing houses, and with that book, it wasn't that good. I was 16. So it was like living a dream. And I almost got hooked up with one of those vanity presses who wants like $1,500. And when I completed Celtic Evil this past winter, and I started the consideration, do I try the submissions again? Do I buy the writer's market and look through them, finding suitable publishers or agents or that route? Or I was online and found out about these like print on demand, like CreateSpace from Amazon or Lulu. And I looked into that long and hard before I jumped into anything this time. And it was a process to think, will I be considered, or will the book be considered real? And after thinking about it, I just didn't decide it mattered to me. So long as I got the book out to readers who would enjoy it, who might get an hour or two or more from enjoyment from what I write, be it Celtic Evil or the poetry book or even the little cookbook. It doesn't matter so long as the readers enjoy it. That's what is concerning me, is my readers enjoy it. If other people don't think of it as a real book because it's not in Borders or Books A Million, it's just something I cope with until maybe one day they will be.
How do you respond, Kelly, to that same kind of process of thinking about your book being self-published or traditionally published? How do you process, deciding to self-publish a book?
I think I'm somewhere in the middle between a self-published author and a traditionally published author. I went through an online press, which is it's a small press, but they do have professional graphic artists and they do have professional editors. So, but it doesn't have. They do use CreateSpace to produce the print on demand books. So I'm kind of like right there in the middle. And I have had some very negative experiences in trying to get into bookstores is I was calling one real bad experience I had with an independent bookstore in St. Pete, Florida, was when I started talking to the owner and asking him if he would be willing to carry my book. He was like, "Are you print on demand?" That was one of the first questions he asked. And I said, "Well, yes, the paperback is print on demand." And so he's like, "No, you're not really published then. You've gone through a printer, not a publisher." So I did have a real negative experience, and I was very insulted. And I thought, well, you know what? You're not going to carry my book ever. So walked away from that guy. But I've also had real positive experiences from a standpoint of there's more marketing that my publisher is able to do for me. Not a lot. I still have to do a lot of promotion on my own. But there are some things that that they do for me that I don't have time to do. So they do a lot of submitting for reviews and a lot of marketing online that that I don't have time to do. But I still have to do a lot of it myself. So it's really in between. And I agree with Sierra. I think as long as your readers are getting their hands on your book, whether it be in ebook format or in paperback format, and they're enjoying it, I think that's that's the most important thing. But I have run into that negativity, and it is it's frustrating when you run into a traditional author and they tend to think that they've paid their dues more than you, and I don't necessarily think that's true. I think I've gone the traditional route also, and it's you're between a rock and a hard place. You need an agent to get with a traditional publisher, and traditional publishers they won't take you unless you're agent represented. An agent won't take you unless you've been published. So you're really caught between that rock and hard place, and it's hard. And so I went that way for it took 6 years for me to get Sealed and Live, get a contract on Sealed and Live, and once I did, I was very excited. So it's while it's not a traditional publisher that we speak of, and I do not have an agent yet, I hope to continue to move toward that. But I'm also very happy where I am because I could get my books out a little more quickly than like Chris was mentioning, waiting 2 years to get the novel out. I can get mine out. I wrote Online Angel in about 4 days and had it out in about 4 weeks.
Wow.
So, you can get them out. You can get them out. But yeah, that was kind of an unusual circumstance. But it was a novella, really, not really a full-length novel. So that it's a little bit easier. But so it's I think it's great either way you go. The only negative thing I think that if you're going to self-publish that you really need to do is get a professional editor. Make sure your work is quality, and a professional graphic artist, because you're putting yourself out there for people to see. And if it's poorly edited, I think that it speaks to your credibility also as an author. So definitely.
Very true. That's great advice. Chris, you mentioned that one of the things that really helped with your first book was that you were able to get a review in the Los Angeles Times, and then it appeared on in the E! Entertainment magazine. What advice would you give to anybody on the panel or to anybody who's watching live or potentially on YouTube as well? What advice would you give on getting those reviews?
It's interesting you asked that because I was Henry Baum and I were emailing each other today on this very subject. He just came out with a new book called American Book of the Dead, and he did not send his books out in advance to reviewers, but he's got other plans ahead. So it's nothing against what he's doing. But if you're an author who's interested in what traditional publishers do and want to try some of that, first of all, you want to get your book reviewed, if at all possible, in some of the industry journals, such as Publishers Weekly, Book List, and others, because bookstores look at those initial reviews on whether they order it or not, and libraries decide whether to order it or not. And libraries, by the way, are a huge market. I know some authors are afraid of, well, a library will only buy one copy and they'll have 50 readers. That's not fair. But there are so many libraries and they'll buy multiple copies. Uh, and so you don't want to eschew that market. It's a great market. Probably the best recommendation I can give is get yourself a book on how to promote your book without a lot of money. There's a book called The Frugal Book Promoter by Carolyn Howard Johnson that shows, it gives names and addresses of where you send your review copies to. And probably the key thing to understand about how to get your book reviewed, especially by traditional media, is you have to treat it like a film. Hollywood promotes their films in advance so that the day the movie comes out, people are in line. They don't start advertising the movie a few days after it starts. And you too need to send your books out 3 to 4 months in advance to book reviewers of note. And even these days, book reviewers online who have literary websites. My last book, The Brightest Moon of the Century, has been reviewed in over 24 online places because they did get the books out in advance. They appreciate getting, free copies, and if your cover looks great and your back cover looks interesting, it's exactly the way people buy books in bookstores. Think about what you do. You go into a bookstore, maybe the title interests you. You pull it out. You look at the cover. That looks good. You flip to the back. You read the back. Hey, that sounds interesting. And you might open up the first page and read the first paragraph. If that nails it, then you buy it. Same if you're someone self-publishing. You want to get all those things down well. Don't ignore it. People buy in certain ways. Even if your book doesn't get in bookstores, people are looking online for that sentence or two. Is it grabbing? I know, Stacy, you're doing extremely well in this regard, in that your books have great covers. They have, great explanations, and you're the guy to follow. Your books are selling extremely well.
Well, I appreciate that. I learned from every one of these conversations, though, things to do. And thinking about getting reviews, as you were talking, I was thinking, Chris, about the idea of blog reviewers and the new power of the blog reviewers. I don't think any of us wishes newspapers were failing, but I think that has been the reality. And the rise of independently published blogs, all of us have a blog, we all read blogs, is a new medium for potentially getting reviews. I wonder, RJ, if that's something that's in your equation for marketing your next book. Are you thinking about getting reviews from blog writers? Is that something that's on your radar?
Absolutely. I've done that with Waiting for Spring, but of course it's all been, post-release. And I definitely, heed Chris's advice this time. I will rather heed Chris's advice this time and send it out beforehand. And I think another thing, I will have a slight advantage next time, because this time coming out, I was unknown. So I think even if I had, sent it out, some blog reviewers will, when they're just starting out, they'll sort of take, a lot, whatever comes with them or whatever. Others are more particular, and I think that had I just been, sending it out this time, it might not have even been accepted for review at some of them. But, coming out with the second novel, the first one has sold pretty well, and it's, gotten a lot of reviews. So I definitely want to take advantage of that, getting it, the advanced review this next time. Absolutely.
Very interesting. One of the things that I did this past summer that seemed to work pretty well that I'll try to capitalize on with the next book is the blog tour. And a blog tour, for folks who are unfamiliar, is basically contacting friends, fans, family members, anybody who has a blog, and contacting them a month or two before your release date, as Chris was indicating, do all this before you publish your book, and set up days that you can visit their blogs in an official capacity or send them a Word document or a cut and pasted blog post that they can post officially on a specific date. And so you basically tour from one blog to the next. I did it for 6 weeks this summer, and it was a lot of work, but I think it was ultimately very successful. And I think, Chris, what you're indicating about the reviews is really key. I think if I could pull together that aspect of my own marketing campaign for the next book, that's something that I haven't done very well. And I think with the advent of blog reviewers and friends and colleagues, people that I've gotten to know through the show, I think there's a lot of potential there. What are your thoughts on the merit, Chris, of getting folks who have blogs like Henry, like RJ, and others to write reviews for your books in the future?
Listen, I adore blog reviewers. They're, in my experience, extremely friendly. They're passionate. They're not being paid to do it. Many of them have a strict schedule. I mean, some people are reviewing a book every day or two and putting a lot of effort in it. I feel like the Renaissance man here, because way back when I too was a book reviewer working at 2 different newspapers, and while it was was more space, more popular then, I still looked at to be an author is a lot like Sisyphus pushing that boulder up. As a reviewer, I would go into the newspaper, and they had a giant closet, and they would tell me, choose any book you'd like to review. And I'd look at the shelves, and there were hundreds of books, and they'd been received only that week. And there were hundreds more on the floor still in boxes. And I was going to review just one, and maybe 9 other reviewers were going to review just one. And so what was going to happen to these thousands of others who didn't get reviewed? So it's always been tough to get reviewed. And again, my advice, if you want to spend time learning anything, to authors who are listening, dear authors, is learn how to write a really great 1-page cover letter. And you send that on. You send that on to traditional reviewers. Chicago Tribune, why not? LA Times, why not?
Chris, if I can interrupt a second. It looks like we have a new caller on the line, and I'm wondering if this is one of our panelists. Who else do we have on the line with us here?
Hello, this is Kevin Girard.
Hey, Kevin.
I'm a late panelist.
Well, better late than never. We're happy to have you on. Thanks so much for calling in.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your books, Kevin.
Well, I write fiction for adults and young adults, and also nonfiction for adults. I think the biggest series I have going is a young adult fantasy 5-book series called Connor and the Crossworlds. And it was interesting listening to someone just talk about reviews, because you do push that rock uphill, but I just kind of fell backwards into an opportunity to review young adult fantasy books for a really premier science fiction fantasy website, and the books are all coming from Penguin. So my reviews are going to pop up on that website, and Penguin's going to definitely read them. So maybe that link will be made.
Well, I think it's a good point. The more active you are in the profession, in whatever capacity, the more your name circulates, the more people begin to recognize it, and certainly writing reviews is something that's going to, if you write glowing reviews, it's going to make you a lot of friends. If you write, so that's that's the tough line you have to walk, I think. Well, Sierra, tell us a little bit about some of the marketing strategies. Sierra Rose, tell us a little bit about some of the marketing strategies or things that you've done that seem to work well in making readers aware of your books.
Well, mainly it's on the Kindle board, actually. That's where most of my marketing goes. I learned a lot from being on the Kindle board as far as marketing strategy and ebooks. As for the paperbacks, I use like bookmarks and just word of mouth on friends and blogs. I have a website and a blog, and I'm still learning the marketing part of the whole self-published aspect of it. So I don't have as many strategies yet. With the new book that's coming in mid-December, I didn't start 3 months ahead because I didn't have the book done 3 months ahead. I did start 2 weeks ahead to start advertising it, which is more than I did with Celtic Evil. I'm hoping on the sequel to Flames of Betrayal, I'll actually start getting it out more ahead of time this time, now that I know that that's what should be done. I was always afraid if you start marketing too early, people are going to get bored of it before the book even comes out. Now I know that that's not the case.
Yeah, it's really a bit of a, once you have done it a few times, you get a little bit better about the timing of things and working everything out. From having the book done to then getting it bound to getting cover art to getting blurbs to marketing it to lining up your blog tour or whatever you're going to do. It all sort of works like a well-oiled clock once you've done it a few times. Well, let's talk a little bit about pricing. The big P in pricing that we're all interested in. One of the things that aspiring writers have to consider and independently published authors have to consider is how to set the price for your books. And I certainly can remember the first couple of books that I self-published as POD, print-on-demand titles, really wringing my hair out about how to actually price the book and what to set the price at. So what price, how did you guys arrive at your pricing for your book, and what have you seen that seems to work the best? Kelly, since we haven't heard from you in a couple of minutes, why don't you start us off there?
Well, I probably won't be much help to you there because my publisher set the price. So they set the ebooks usually at $5.99, and then depending on the size, she does print on demand through CreateSpace. So they usually set the price, and then she adds in a little bit for of course the cover artist and the editors. So the paperback books do tend to be a little pricier. They are trade paperbacks, obviously, so they're nicer size, nicer, larger print, whiter paper, so they look really good. But I've had some people say it's a little pricey, and especially when it comes out on Amazon, it's a little expensive. So sometimes I'll sell them at a discount on my website to try to get the paperbacks moving. When I had a book signing not too long ago on Halloween, that was basically what I did. I marked them up. I paid the publisher's price, but then I marked them up, but not as much as they were marked up through Amazon. So I was able to have that little bit of flexibility. But as far as setting the price, I can't do that.
Okay, well that's good. That's good for folks to know. If you go through a traditional publisher, you don't have any say in really what the price is. Although I guess you could maybe negotiate it some, and maybe you will in the future. Nonetheless, it's good to know. It's good advice to know, or good knowledge to have. Kevin, since you've just joined us, how did you set the price for the Connor and the Crossworlds series, and what price have you seen in different formats that seems to work best?
Well, the first thing you have to consider is, do you want to sell these, if you're a self-published author, do you want to make these available in bookstores or in .com versions of bookstores? And if you do, you're going to have to offer a hefty discount, somewhere between 35 and 55%. So the book has to be priced high enough to where you can offer that discount and make a little bit of money for each sale yourself. I make way more money just going to schools and doing signings and different venues because I have a captive audience and they're all there to hear me and they're all there to buy. But I just won't do without that presence in bookstores and .com sites. You just got to have that. If somebody goes away from that event at a venue and they didn't come prepared to buy, but you give them a postcard and there's directions on where to buy it, then they can go and purchase it on that .com or in the bookstore. You know, the ebook sites are a totally different thing. You know, there really is no discount you have to worry about there, because if you're dealing through Kindle or Smashwords or Mobile Read or any kind of venue like that, you can pretty much set the price at what you want. I think $5.99 is a pretty common price. But I see from going through a lot of those discussion boards that people price them a lot lower, especially if it's their first novel, just to make it attractive and have people buy. And you can use coupons through, I know, Smashwords. I'm pretty sure you could probably do it through Kindle. But I think in an ebook format, you just have a lot more freedom than you do otherwise.
RJ, what are your thoughts on pricing?
Well, like you mentioned, Waiting for Spring was my first novel, so I did offer it at first on Kindle for 99 cents, and I've since, after it got a lot of sales that way, I've since raised it to $2.99, and the sales have still been fairly high. I think that with the next book, I am going to start out at $5.99 and see how that works for me.
Very interesting. Well, you guys, for folks who are watching, you're watching Book Chatter. I am your host, Stacy Cochran. We have on the line with us tonight Kevin Gerard, Chris Meeks, Kelly Abel, Sierra Rose, and R.J. Keller. We've been talking a lot about the ways to publish a book. We have quite a variety of vehicles for publishing represented here tonight. Chris, I wanted to come back to something that you mentioned very early on. If we have any authors, aspiring writers in our audience, or folks interested, you are represented by an agent. A literary agent, for folks who don't know, typically sells the rights for an author's books to a major publisher. What does your current literary agent, think about your independently publishing your books?
You know, that's very interesting. Good question. When I signed on with him, he's in a big agency in New York. He, right off the bat, said, you know, doing short fiction wasn't going to make them a lot of money either, much as my first agent said. So he was thrilled I was going ahead with it, because if I could build an audience of readers, that's only going to help him when he comes to sell my novels. He's been very patient in that he's already sent around one book. My writing tends to be, well, some reviewers call it quirky. And the response he received from this book, which was called The Laughter and Sadness of Sex, I think it was a great title. I read some of the rejections, and some of them actually looked like acceptances, but it ended up with, we don't know how to market this book. That's why I've turned to writing a mystery, because writing the offbeat literary book is a very difficult genre, and traditional publishers are a bit wary right now. Maybe they were being very kind, but yet I took it as a mandate to try something else, something that interested me. I didn't write a mystery novel because I thought it'd make me a pile of money. I wrote it because I'm fascinated by the genre and wanted to see what I could learn. So, how's that?
You've sold out.
Maybe, but we'll see. See if it's gripping or not.
Hey, if it sells and you make a pile of money, just invite me to the launch party, and all is forgiven. I say, I'll do the same for you if it happens for me as well.
Right. Excellent.
Well, we're coming down to our last 5 or 6 minutes here on Book Chatter. I want to remind folks who are watching, if you have questions for our authors here tonight, we do have an instant message chat. You can sign on anonymously. You can ask a question by typing in and then clicking send, and that shows up instantly on our board here. So let's talk in our final few minutes about the process to write. I think it was it Sierra that said earlier that you wrote a book in 4 days, or was that Kelly?
Kelly.
It was Kelly.
Kelly, tell us about writing a book in 4 days. How in the heck did you do that?
That was kind of a really interesting experience for me. I had a meeting with my boss, and he was telling me this story about this girl that he met, or they dated in college, and they both went their separate ways. And he continued to tell the story about she had a failed marriage, he had a failed marriage, and they linked up again on Facebook. And he said, jokingly, that's kind of a funny story. And he said, that'd be a great book for you. And I said, you're right, it would. And I drove home. I had driven about an hour to Orlando to meet with him, and I was driving home, and I could see the whole book from start to finish. And I took a lot of fictional liberties with their story. I did ask his permission, if I could do it first. And it started out as a short story, and I called my publisher because there was a little holiday short story contest going on with the publisher, and I said, I can't do this in 4,000 words. I just can't stop. It's too much of a story. And she said, well, take it on out there and take it as far as it goes, and I'll publish it as a book for you. And I said, okay. So it ended up being about 53,000 words. So really it's a novella instead of a novel. But man, it just kept flowing. And I got it done in 4 days and took them 2 or 3 weeks to edit it and get the cover design done. We've got an awesome cover artist, and she did such a great job with it. I just really, was really pleased with the cover. And it was a holiday story, so I wanted to get it out in time for the holidays so people could take a look at it. But I've never had that happen. The last 2 books I did, Sealed in Lies took about a year, and Haunted Destiny took about 6 months. And with the sequel, I'm writing the sequel to Sealed in Lies now, and it's just not moving. I cannot see the end as easily as I did with this one. I've never had that happen before, so it was kind of a really unique experience for me.
Chris wants to know what the name of your 4-day book is.
That was Online Angel.
Online Angel. There you have it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's kind of go round table. We've just got a few minutes left here. I do want to remind folks who are watching that you can ask a question of our panelists by using the instant message chat. Let's see, who do we have that I don't really know your writing process very well? Kevin, can you talk a little bit about your writing process for Connor and the Crossworlds?
Well, I started, and I wanted to write in the morning because I'm a morning person, and I would get up early and I would write, and then I suddenly realized that I was very busy because I teach college and I do all these things. And I realized that when I have an extra 30 minutes, that's when I need to sit down and write. So I got real good at wherever I was adding to the story. But if it's a process, it's editing what I wrote yesterday before I write what I'm going to write today. That helps me build the strength of the story. It gets my mind back in where I was, and then I can continue on. And the other thing that somebody already said this. If you're writing about something that you love, it will just come a lot easier than if you're writing about something that you think you should be writing about, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
When Michael Vick got arrested for running his dog ring, I had just had enough. And I wrote a book that's, 300-something pages about a team of men who all work in this
90 seconds
and have a little hobby on the weekends and at night. And they go around and find people who are abusing animals for entertainment, and they take care of them. And that little incident with Michael Vick kind of spurred me on to write that. I love animals a lot. I can't stand to see them abused. And I think that's the real secret. Whatever your process is, write about what you love, and it will come.
We have a great question from Big Willie Style on the instant message chat. It'll be interesting if anybody can answer this question. What Jackie Chan movies are your greatest influence? Anybody?
Who's Jackie Chan?
No influence from Jackie Chan for me.
There might be a little bit of an influence of Jackie Chan style movies in the Colorado Sequence, actually. I'm very familiar with the action genre, so you might see a little bit of that influence there, certainly in some of the fighting scenes. So check that out, the Colorado Sequence, Big Willie style. Thanks for the question. Well, we're coming down to our last minute here. I should let our viewership know exactly who we've had on the show. We have Chris Meeks, who is the author of The Middle-Aged The Middle-Aged Man in the Sea. Kevin Gerard joined us a little bit late this evening, and he is the author of Connor and the Crossworlds. That is a series, Connor and the Crossworlds. Kelly Abel is the author of Sealed in Lies, as well as Online Angel, which she wrote, Online Angel, in 4 days, we just discovered. Amazing. Check those out. Sierra Rose is the author of Celtic Evil, and a forthcoming action novel, Flames of the Trail, as well as a poetry collection. And we had R.J. Keller on, my regular co-host, and R.J. is the author of Waiting for Spring. I think I got everybody there. Did I forget anybody? Cool. So I got everybody. So check out their books, Amazon.com. I am your host, Stacy Cochran. I'll be leaving the instant message chat up live for a couple of minutes here after we go off the air for anybody who wants to give any parting words. You guys have a great evening, and thank you all for joining me on the show tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stacy.
Y'all have a great night. So long.